Hi, my name is Zach Brown. I'm one of the International Student Advisors here in the International Students and Scholars Office of the University of Texas at Dallas. In this video, I'm going to be helping you put together your post-completion OPT application. We are here to assist you during this exciting process of applying for post-completion OPT, but as a quick disclaimer, remember that the ISSO is here to assist, not to do it for you. This session will help you put that packet together. We also have many other resources like our OPT guide, our website, and of course our other advising services to assist you and make you feel confident about that application. Ultimately, it is your responsibility to do that final check of your documents before sending it to USCIS. As an overview, these are all of the documents we're going to discuss today and likely the documents you're going to include in your post-completion OPT application. Starting with the optional G1145, followed by 2 passport photos, the filing fee payment, the original I-765 form, a copy of your OPT I20, copies of your passport, I94 and F1 visa, a CPT printout from your CVIS record, which will be provided by the ISSO with your OPT I20, and finally, if applicable to your situation, copies of any previous EADs or OPT I20s from previous periods of OPT that you may have had. The first form, the G1145, arguably the easiest form in the application, but it is optional. What this form is an authorization to USCIS to send you application processing updates via email or text. Usually they're going to send you updates if they have mailed something. So for example, they could send you an update saying that they've mailed your receipt notice, and then sometime after an update saying that they've mailed your EAD. What you want to do is list your full name and the contact information that you want USCIS to use. Next, we have the 2 passport photos. As a UT Dallas student, you have access to the comment card office located in the SSA. The comment card office is a great place to get these passport photos taken. They have excellent quality and standards to satisfy the requirements of passport photos. Those standards include 2 by 2 inches, a color photo, nothing obscuring your face, etc. As a means of identification, you want to write your full name and I94 number on the back of those photos. I generally recommend writing that information with a pencil. If you write it with a pen, sometimes the ink in that pen can be a little too heavy and it might smudge or rub off on the photos. We definitely don't want to mess up or obscure those photos because it could impact USCIS's processing of your application. These photos need to be relatively recent, so taken within the last 6 months. Of course, don't use the same passport photo that you used for your passport 3 years ago or something like that. If you're not able to go to the comment card office on campus, you can find passport photo services at other locations. Some drugstores, grocery stores, or office supply stores offer those services. So if you have any of those locally, do a bit of research, contact them and see if they have passport photo services. Sometimes these services, the photos can be a little hit or miss. So if you receive a photo and you personally feel it looks a little blurry, maybe it looks a little dark, it's likely safest to just go to a different location and try to get a new photo just to be safe. After the photos, we have the I-765 filing fee. There are a number of ways we could provide that filing fee payment to USCIS. We could use a money order, cashier's check, personal check, or this USCIS form G1450. Money orders are a great option because you pay that amount up front. Personal checks are also good. Personal checks, make sure you're using a personal one and not a temporary check. The difference you can see on this slide right here, the bottom check is a temporary check because it does not have a name and address anywhere on it. The top would be an example of a personal check. Cashier's checks are also acceptable. Just make sure that that cashier's check is likely going to be valid by the time USCIS looks at it. Sometimes cashier's checks are only valid for a certain amount of time, whether that's 60 days or 90 days. If it does have an expiration, it will be printed on the payment itself more than likely. The G1450 is just an option I do not recommend. Our office each OPT season will see a handful of rejections due to the use of this form. It's unclear why it's leading to a rejection. Perhaps the bank is not letting the credit card payment clear. Perhaps it's an issue with the credit card itself that USCIS has. Because of that uncertainty, I just do not recommend using the form and instead using one of the other three options, the money order, personal check, or cashier's check. Make sure you make the payment payable to U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And similar to the I-94 and name that we put on the back of the photos, we also want to put that somewhere on the payment. So some checks have a memo spot, so we could indicate the I-94 number there. Alternatively, we could just put it on any open space. So for this example personal check we see on the slide, I think to the right of where that name and address is a good spot where we could fit in I-94, colon, and then the I-94 number. The reason why we want to include that on the payment and on the photos is if for some reason either of those gets separated from your application. Imagine a USCIS adjudicator is processing your application, a sudden gust of wind blows away your photos. We need a way that USCIS can connect those photos back to your application. So that means if identification will provide, being the name and I-94 number, can help them do so. Now, on the top of this slide, it says check for $410. You may be watching this video the day after it's uploaded, or maybe a year after it's uploaded. That filing fee may no longer be $410. So to find out the most current filing fee, the most current I-765 edition, or the I-765 filing location, go to USCIS's official I-765 website. You can find all of that information there. Next, we have the intimidatingly long 7-page I-765. Don't stress about it too much. In this video, we're going to help you fill it out. We also have our draft I-765 and our OPT guide to assist you. One thing to remember about this I-765 is that you need to provide your answers using a black ink pen or by typing. You can use any combination of the two. So for example, on page 1, I could completely type it. And then on page 2, I could handwrite in black ink if I wanted to. Either are acceptable. For this first page, we will select 1A for initial permission to accept employment. Below, in the Your Full Legal Name section, indicate your name as it is indicated on your passport. So for example, if your passport has a last name field and a given name field, just copy those fields over to this section. If your other immigration documents use different formatting or even different spellings for your names, you can indicate it in this Other Names Used section. If you don't have any other names used on your other immigration documents or in your document history, you can indicate N/A for not applicable in this section. Now on this slide, I would say this is maybe not the best example of an N/A because that slash looks a little bit like a lowercase l or an uppercase I. You might be trying to type this N/A and you might find that the PDF editor is not allowing you to use a slash. In that case, handwriting it's totally okay. Just make sure you're being very intentional with the diagonal of that slash. Page 2 is where you will indicate your U.S. mailing address. This is where USCIS will mail any notices to you. So for example, your receipt notice and eventually that EAD. You want to pick an address that you're confident you would have access to for the next 6 months because federal mail cannot be forwarded. If your current physical address, where you're currently residing, is the same as that mailing address, you would check yes for question 6, and then you can leave the physical address blank in the next section. If your physical address is different than the mailing address you're going to use, select no in question 6, and then write your physical address in that number 7 section. After that, the alien registration number. If you had a previous EAD, the USCIS number on that EAD is your alien registration number. So if you've never had an EAD before, you do not have an A number, and thus you can safely skip that question. The majority of F1 students are not going to have the USCIS online account number. If you have no idea what that is and if you've never heard of it, it probably means you don't have it, so you can just skip that question. After that, we have two personal questions, a question asking if you've ever filed the I-765, so answer accordingly. After that, we have questions about the SSN. If you already have your SSN, you could answer similarly to what I have on this slide right here. You could select yes, indicate your SSN in 13B, check no in question 14, and then skip ahead to that country on question 18A. If you do not have an SSN, but you want to request one with this EAD application, you could select no on question 13A, skip 13B, select yes on questions 14 and 15, and then indicate your parents' names below. If you do not have an SSN, but you do not want to request one, perhaps you already have a pending SSN ongoing right now, you could select no for 13A, skip 13B, and then select no for question 14. In 18A, indicate the country that you are currently a citizen of, and in 18B, if you're only a citizen of one country, I think this is another good spot to use that in/A for not applicable. The most important piece of information here on page 3 is C3B. That's the eligibility category for post-completion OPT that we're going to give on question 27, the top of the right side. Everything on the left side you're going to pull from your passport, your I94, or in the case of question 26 for your CVIS number, you'll get that from the top of page 1 of your I20. So make sure that you're looking at your passport and your I94 to get that correct information for the left side, and then for the right side, indicate C3B for that post-completion OPT. After the C3B, none of these questions are applicable to that particular category, so I think you can safely skip ahead. The left side of page 4 is just part 2 continued, so let's continue skipping ahead because these questions are not applicable to the C3B category. If you can read and understand English and filled out this form yourself, select 1A, and then below that, your applicant contact information. Questions 4 and 5 in this section have if any in parentheses next to the question, which to me indicates that they are optional questions. Number 3 does not say if any, which I would assume means that the question is required. So if you only have one phone number, indicate that phone number in question number 3, whether that's your cell phone number or what have you. Provide your handwritten black ink signature in 7A, and then below in 7B, indicate the date of your signature. Again, it should be handwritten, not typed, and only in black ink, so not blue ink, for example. Try to fit the entirety of that signature within that box below applicant's signature. For part 4, unless you used an interpreter, I think you can safely skip ahead. If you use a preparer, have them complete part 5. If you do not use a preparer, similar to part 4, I think you can safely skip ahead. In part 6, for post-completion OPT, you want to provide information for all previous CVIS ID numbers, CPTs, or OPT authorizations. For example, if prior to this application I have done 3 CPTs, I could indicate the first CPT in question 3, the second CPT in question 4, and then the third CPT in question 5. For the previous CVIS ID numbers, CPTs, and OPTs, use the applicable formatting that we show as an example on this page right here. Also in part 6, if you feel it necessary to provide additional information to the USCIS adjudicator, you could use this page. For example, maybe there was a question on a previous page where you did not have enough space in that box to provide the full answer. You could provide that full answer using the extra space on this page. After all 7 pages of the I-765, we have the copy of your OPT I-20. Just pages 1 and 2 are sufficient. There's a few things on that I-20 you're going to want to check for. Of course, check that it's signed by the DSO. Below, you want your signature and date of that signature. On page 2, double check that those are the OPT dates that you want to request. And then on page 1, under the remarks section, the ISSO will include a statement along the lines of, recommendation issued on some date. USCIS needs to receive your application within 30 days of that date. If you have held on to your I-20 and 26 days have passed and you haven't mailed the application, it's probably a good idea to request a new OPT recommendation in I-20 from the ISSO, just so that you make sure USCIS doesn't receive it on the 31st or 32nd day. USCIS is expecting a copy of the I-20, not the original I-20. So I assume there's a little bit of leniency there on the quality of the I-20 copy. If you feel like it's not 100% clear, maybe it's a little dark, it's likely okay as long as it's legible, includes your signature, the DSO signature, and of course the OPT request on page 2. Next, we have copies of your immigration documents, the first of which is a copy of your passport ID page. A color copy is okay, or a black and white copy is also okay. Just pick whichever you feel like is most readable, most legible. On this example, you can see that there's nothing cut off. It includes the entire passport ID page. So we can see the photo, the biographical information, and the machine readable zone at the bottom. So make sure your copy includes the same. Just after the passport copy, we have the I94 copy. If you go to that official I94 website, type in your passport information, it should generate your most recent I94. This is where you will find the I94 number that you'll indicate on the back of those photos and somewhere on that filing fee payment. When you generate your I94, you might also get additional pages of travel history. It's not required to provide those travel history pages with the application. If the last time you entered the United States was over 10 years ago or so, you might have received a paper I94. If that's the case, provide copies of the front and back. All of the information I provided for the passport copy is also applicable for this visa copy. So make sure nothing is cut off, color or black and white are okay, just include the entire page. For most of our students, the final page in their application is going to be this CPT printout. This page is simply a printout of the CPT page in your SEVIS record. If you have never done a CPT, this page will probably say something like no employment data found. Still provide this page with your application. If you had multiple CPTs, the printout might be multiple pages, in which case provide all of those pages with your application. Because this printout comes from SEVIS, which is an online database, sometimes it doesn't fully load when we click that print button. So yours might be missing that SEVIS header and banner that you see at the top of this sample one. That should be totally fine. The important thing is that the information, the biographical and CPT information, is correct. When you're filling out part 6 of the I-765 with your CPT information, double check those CPT dates and employer names on this CPT printout. This CPT page will be provided with your OPT I-20, so you do not need to submit a separate request for it. Just request your OPT I-20 and we will provide this with it. If applicable to your situation, provide copies of any previous EADs, so maybe previous OPT authorizations or previous work authorizations from other immigration statuses. Provide front and back copies. So that's all of the pages for your post-completion OPT application. I'm back on video, and with me I have a sample post-completion OPT application. I've got my I-765 here. On page 1 of the I-765, I have stapled my personal check aligned with the center left edge. The reason I've done that is I don't want that check to go flying when they spill the documents from the envelope that I mailed to them. I want it secured to my application. I think that's the only staple that should be required for the application. They're likely going to scan all of the documents, so if I staple it, they're just going to remove that staple anyways. So I like to just paper clip everything together. The I-765, OPT I-20 copy, copies of your passport, I-94 and visa, and that CPT printout, all just paperclip together. Underneath that paperclip at the top of the I-765, you can put a little photo bag, right? I've got a little sandwich bag I just got at my local grocery store, so I could put my 2 passport photos in there. I like to put that paperclip right at the edge of the bag so that my photos can safely sit right here. I want to put those photos in a bag just so they're not sitting loose in the envelope that I sent to USCIS and getting scratched up. On top of all of these documents that are paper clipped together, you could put the optional G1145 just resting on top, and then just slide all of those documents into the envelope that you send to USCIS. Speaking of that envelope, let's say you're standing in the DHL, the FedEx, the UPS, or UP, United States Postal Service office that you're going to use for your application. You might be feeling a little stressed. You might be scared to seal that envelope for the last time. These are the top 6 things that I would recommend checking before sealing the application for the final time. Number 1, 1A on page 1 of your I-765. Number 2, C3B. That's on page 3 of your I-765. Number 3, your handwritten black ink signature on page 5 of the I-765. Your signature on your OPT I20. That recommendation date mentioned in the remarks section of page 1 of your OPT I20, remember 30 days. And then lastly, just do a double check of that payment. Make sure it's paid to the right amount and payable to U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Earlier, I mentioned that primary source, the USCIS website. Of course, the day that you plan on mailing your application, go back to that website. Make sure that your filing fee amount, your I-765 edition are both correct, and make sure that you're going to be mailing it to the correct address that USCIS wants you to send it to. All 3 pieces of information there are very important, so you want to make sure you're going straight to USCIS to get that information. Before I put the application into the envelope, or maybe even before I go to the UPS FedEx, I want to copy the entire application, every page. That could be photos with my phone, using a copier, whatever. Let's imagine a scenario where I mail my application and then a month from now, or a month from then, I wake up in the middle of the night and I suddenly think, oh no, I forgot to sign the I-765. If I didn't photocopy, there's no way I'm going to know until USCIS sends me some sort of notice. But if I've got a photocopy or a photo of that I-765, I can double check to make sure I've signed it, relieved my stress, so I'm not stressing about it for the next 2 or 3 months, however long it takes USCIS to process the application. So that is it. That is your post-completion OPT application. I hope this video answered most of the questions you had about compiling that packet. I hope it left you feeling confident about the application and maybe a little less stressed. If you're still feeling a little stressed or afraid about that process, I will say, UT Dallas has more F1 students on STEM OPT in the nation, right, of any other school. I'm not just saying that to brag, but I bring it up to kind of highlight that we have a very large sample size. We see a lot of OPT applications. For last year, spring 2020, that OPT season probably we had about 1,500 students apply. The majority of those students send it off, get the receipt notice, and then get their EAD. It goes that smoothly. It may take a little bit longer for USCIS to process it than we would like, but it usually goes that smoothly. Denials for post-completion OPT applications are quite rare in our office. We see maybe 1 or 2 each OPT season, and they are almost always denied because of a failure to mail the application on time. Remember that OPT recommendation date? USCIS needs to receive your application within 30 days of that recommendation date. So if you mail it 45 days after, it's likely going to result in a denial. Rejections are a bit more common than denials, but still pretty rare overall. The most common rejection reason we see is due to using that credit card form. We see it lead to so many rejections that I really, really recommend do not use that G1450, the credit card form. Use any of the other payment options available. Aside from using that form, other common rejection reasons we see: forgetting to sign the I-765 or I-20, or forgetting to check that box 1A, or writing C3B on the I-765. So double check, triple check, check your application as many times as you need to leave you feeling confident and comfortable. If you have any other questions, Of course, you can refer to our advising services or use our other OPT-related resources that you can find on our website. I wish you the best of luck with your OPT application, and I hope you hear back from USCIS very quickly.